outside a secluded manor in the western part of the ancient city of 10,000 epochs. Although the city was now overcrowded, this particular manor remained eerily quiet. The powerful individuals scattered throughout the city rarely dared to approach, as if they feared something. This was, after all, the estate of the Futu ancient clan. When Mu Chun arrived outside the manor, the guards at the gate immediately recognized him. They hurried forward to greet him respectfully. Young Master Mu Chun, the first elder is already waiting inside. Due to the previous turmoil caused by Mu Chun within the Futu ancient clan, nearly everyone in the clan did not recognize him, especially since Qin Yanjing had recently ascended to the position of first elder, wielding great power. No one dared show anything less than the utmost respect to the son of this formidable figure. Thank you. Mu Chun nodded slightly. Although he had little interest in the title of Young Master, he couldn't be bothered to correct it again and again. He simply stepped into the manor, passing through the tranquil courtyard until he came upon Qin Yanjing standing in front of the hall. Mother! Mu Chun quickened his steps and flashed her a smile. You little rascal, causing such a huge ruckus as soon as you leave, Qin Yanjing said, ruffling his hair with a playful scold. Clearly, she had heard about Mu Chun's encounter with Huang Xuanji, the Ghost Emperor, and others. There's nothing I can do, things always go wrong. Mu Chun shook his head helplessly, then smiled at Qin Yanjing. Has father not come? Qin Yanjing's expression grew a little more serious. This is a place of chaos. How could I let him come and get involved in such turmoil? She fixed her gaze on Mu Chun, then slowly asked, Xun'er, are you truly determined to fight for the eternal undying body? Mu Chun's expression became serious as well. He nodded firmly. Mother, I've spent many years striving for the eternal undying body. I will never give up on it. It was the path he had chosen to reach the saint grade. If he failed to attain the eternal undying body, all his years of effort would be wasted, and it would take even more time and energy to reach the saint grade again. Thus, the eternal undying body was his only path to the saint grade. Qin Yanjing looked at her son with a smile, nodding slightly. Since my son has such ambition, then I, as your mother, will naturally support you with all my might. Thank you, mother. A warm feeling surged through Mu Chun's heart. He knew that competing for the eternal undying body would not be easy. Even if he succeeded, he would undoubtedly face resistance from the Mo ancient clan. This clan had long regarded the eternal undying body as a forbidden treasure. Had it not been for the Immortal Emperor establishing the Eternal Assembly years ago, they would never have allowed anyone else to compete for it. By supporting him, Qin Yanjing would tear the relationship with the Mo ancient clan apart, and the clash would undoubtedly shake the world. The Mo ancient clan is incredibly powerful. For your sake, I've even sought help, Qin Yanjing said with a smile, pointing to a nearby courtyard. Mu Chun looked over and froze. In the courtyard, an old man dressed in tattered clothes was wielding a hoe, laboriously digging the ground. Seeing the old man's face, Mu Chun couldn't help but exclaim, Futu Xian? The old man was none other than the previous first elder of the Futu ancient clan, Futu Xian. Mu Chun hadn't expected Qin Yanjing to bring him out of retirement. At that moment, Futu Xian looked up, tossed the hoe aside, and walked over expressionlessly. He glanced at Mu Chun and snorted coldly. This kid? He thinks he can compete for the eternal undying body? I don't believe it. Mo Hu, Yi Qing, Tuobat Song, Shi Luo, none of them are pushovers. Qin Yanjing smiled. First elder, whether Mu Chun can obtain the eternal undying body or not is his business. All we need to do is protect him when he succeeds. Futu Xian paused before responding. I'll help if needed, but you know my terms. My terms. Mu Chun interjected, eyeing Futu Xian warily. The old man had separated him from his mother for decades, and now that they had finally reunited, Mu Chun couldn't help but be cautious. Qin Yanjing said, the first elder's terms are that if Mu Chun really obtains the eternal undying body, he must recognize his roots, acknowledge himself as a member of the Futu ancient clan, and become the clan leader. Mu Chun's face twisted in sarcasm. Didn't the first elder always say I was a sinner? Now you want me to acknowledge myself as part of the Futu ancient clan. Futu Xian's face twitched at Mu Chun's mocking tone. His thick skin actually turned slightly red. But Mu Chen didn't push it too far. He reined in his sarcasm and frowned. I'm really not that interested in becoming the clan leader of the Futu Ancient clan. Isn't there anyone else in the clan who can take the position? In the entire Futu Ancient clan, you're the only one with a real chance of stepping into the Saint grade, Qing Yinjing replied with a hint of pride. Mu Chen rubbed his forehead. Just managing the Mu Manor already gave him a headache, let alone taking on a clan with a heritage spanning countless ages. Maybe we shouldn't ask him for help after all. Worst case, I'll shamelessly ask Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor again, Mu Chen muttered, curling his lips. Humph, you're unlikely to get them this time, Fu Tu Xian snorted coldly, clearly annoyed. Within the Futu Ancient clan, the heads of the Xian and Mo bloodlines were begging to become clan leader, yet this kid kept pushing back like it was some terrible burden. Why not? Mu Chen asked, surprised. Qing Yinjing's expression turned serious as well. She lowered her voice. Recently, there's been strange movements from the extraterritorial evil clan. The Martial Realm and the Boundless Fire Domain are currently guarding the borders of the Great Thousand Worlds. Even Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor dare not act rashly. Mu Chen's eyes sharpened instantly. The extraterritorial evil clan, enemies to all life within the Great Thousand Worlds. Compared to that threat, all other conflicts had to be set aside. If that was the case, then he truly couldn't ask those two for help so lightly. Xun'er, I know you harbor resentment toward the Futu Ancient clan, but that doesn't change the fact that their blood runs through your veins. And can you really bear to see your mother shouldering this alone? Qing Yinjing grasped Mu Chen's hand, her eyes reddening as she spoke softly. Faced with her gentle plea, Mu Chen could only surrender with a wry smile. All right, I give in, okay? If I truly gain the recognition of the eternal undying body, then I'll accept the role of clan leader. My sweet, understanding boy, Qing Yinjing beamed, the redness in her eyes vanishing as she stroked his hair affectionately. Mu Chen let out a helpless sigh. Women and their acting skills, terrifying, truly. Off to the side, Fu Tu Xian's expression finally softened upon seeing Mu Chen agree. He had always felt reluctant about pushing Mu Chen into the role, but from the younger generation, no one could match Mu Chen's talent and accomplishments. In time, Mu Chen might very well reach the Saint grade. And a Saint grade Heavenly Supreme was of immense value, even to a clan as ancient as theirs. The reason the Mode Ancient clan led the 5 ancient clans was precisely because they had 3 Saint grades among them. If Mu Chen could ascend to that level, then the Futu Ancient clan would be able to challenge them for supremacy. So if it meant restoring the clan's reputation, Fu Tu Xian was willing to let Mu Chen take the position. At this point, even the most stubborn traditionalist couldn't justify pushing a future Saint grade away. Tomorrow marks the start of the Eternal Assembly. According to our intel, there will be a total of 108 participants this time, Fu Tu Xian said slowly. 108, Mu Chen murmured, a jolt running through his heart. He couldn't help but click his tongue in awe. The Great Thousand Worlds truly were vast. Until now, he had rarely encountered anyone who had formed an immortal golden body, yet with the start of the Eternal Assembly, 107 such cultivators had emerged. It was a hidden world of dragons and tigers indeed. This was clearly intentional on the part of the Immortal Emperor. He left behind numerous inheritances to find the most outstanding successors, Mu Chen mused. The Immortal Emperor must have gone to great lengths in his selection process. Mother, has no one ever been chosen by the Eternal Undying Body in past Eternal Assemblies? Mu Chen asked. After all, anyone who had cultivated the immortal golden body would have extraordinary talent. Yet no one had ever received its recognition? Qing Yinjing gently shook her head, her voice tinged with awe. It is, after all, one of the 5 primordial law bodies, invincible in this world. Gaining its recognition is no easy feat. Mu Chen nodded, his expression growing solemn. His gaze turned toward the very center of the city, where he faintly sensed a subtle, ancient fluctuation. Clearly, earning the recognition of the eternal undying body would not be simple. He pressed his lips together. In his dark eyes, a fierce determination ignited. His fingers slowly curled into a fist. No matter how difficult the path ahead, he would never give up. Because this was the path he had chosen, the path toward the Saint grade. Tomorrow, let me contend with the heroes of the world. Ding! As the second day arrived, the ancient bell's chime echoed through every corner of the city. After a brief silence, countless figures shot up into the sky, like a swarm of locusts, descending toward the very center of the ancient city. In the heart of the city stood a bare mountain peak. It was an unremarkable peak, but at its summit, a weathered and ancient stone tower stood in quiet solitude. The stone tower was equally unremarkable, yet any powerful beings who ventured within a 10,000-meter radius of this area could faintly sense a pressure that seemed to pierce through time and space. This oppressive feeling made their expressions turn serious, and a sense of reverence surfaced in their eyes. This stone tower was known as the Eternal Tower, and it was said to have been personally built by the Immortal Emperor. The ancient first powerhouse who once saved the entire Great Thousand Worlds was revered by nearly everyone. Is this the Eternal Tower? Mu Chen, Qing Yanjing, and Fu Tuxian appeared on a tower surrounding the mountain peak. Mu Chen gazed at the ancient stone tower, his expression slightly solemn. The eternal undying body, is it within this tower? The Immortal Emperor truly deserves his name. Even after thousands of years, this tower still gives off a feeling of awe, Fu Tuxian said, his eyes fixed on the tower. Even he, a saint-grade heavenly supreme, felt a trace of danger when facing this tower. The strength of the Immortal Emperor seems to transcend even saint-grade. Mu Chen remained silent for a moment. He had met many saint-grade heavenly supremes, but none had given him such a feeling. Qing Yanjing slightly nodded, her expression grave. The Immortal Emperor has indeed transcended saint-grade. Transcended saint-grade? Mu Chen's heart stirred. So, that mysterious level truly represents the peak of this world? In the current Great Thousand Worlds, only 2 individuals might have a chance to reach the Immortal Emperor's level, Fu Tuxian said in a low voice. Mu Chen's eyes flashed slightly. Flame Emperor? Martial Ancestor? Among the many saint grades he had encountered, only these 2 gave him an indescribable feeling. They were like the stars in the sky, immeasurable, unfathomable. Fu Tuxian sighed. Even someone as rigid as he was couldn't hide his admiration. Although these 2 come from the lower planes, their talents and dispositions are extraordinary. Given time, reaching the level of the Immortal Emperor is not impossible. If that's the case, it would be a good thing for the Great Thousand Worlds. With these 2, we need not fear the extraterritorial evil clan, Mu Chen said with a smile. Hearing this, Qing Yanjing shook her head gravely, and Fu Tuxian's expression grew serious, lacking any lightheartedness. You underestimate the extraterritorial evil clan. When they invaded the Great Thousand Worlds, the Great Thousand Worlds Alliance was on the retreat, step by step. Even after the Immortal Emperor turned the tide, all they did was stabilize the situation. Nearly half of the Great Thousand Worlds was occupied by the extraterritorial evil clan. Qing Yanjing sighed lightly. That war, rather than calling it a victory, it was more of a temporary halt in their offensive. The most crucial point is that the strongest among the extraterritorial evil clan, the heavenly evil god, was sealed by the Immortal Emperor at the cost of his own life. This caused the evil clan's leadership to collapse, forcing them to cease their war. Mu Chen's expression turned solemn. Though only a few words were spoken, he could feel the devastating atmosphere of that era. It was hard to imagine the peril the Great Thousand Worlds faced at that time. One misstep, and countless lives in the Great Thousand Worlds would have been enslaved by the extraterritorial evil clan. He had once seen the fate of lower plane beings who were enslaved by the extraterritorial evil clan, and it was a fate no different from being kept like livestock. Over the years, the extraterritorial evil clan has been showing signs of restlessness, and we know nothing about their current situation. If they were to give birth to a new evil god, the peace of the Great Thousand Worlds would once again be shattered, Fu Tuxian said, his voice heavy. Seeing the grave expressions on both of them, Mu Chen offered words of comfort. There's no need to worry prematurely. When the enemy comes, we shall fight. If the extraterritorial evil clan truly intends to return, we will meet them head-on. The Immortal Emperor was able to drive them back then, and the Great Thousand Worlds of today are much stronger than they were in that era. Boom. As Mu Chen was soothing the 2, the ancient sound of a bell echoed once again, growing louder. More and more figures descended from the sky, landing around the stone tower. Mu Chen raised his head, his gaze sweeping across the scene, and then stopped in front of the stone tower. There, a towering stone platform stood. On the platform, many figures were gathered, and at the very front, Mu Chen saw a familiar silhouette, none other than Mahayu. Beside Mahayu stood a middle-aged man dressed in golden robes. His expression was calm, his physique imposing, exuding an air of unspoken authority. There was no fluctuation of spiritual energy around him, yet even Mahayu displayed a trace of respect in his demeanor. The elders of the Mo ancient clan standing behind them stepped back, not daring to stand on equal footing with him. That is the leader of the Mo ancient clan, Mo Tian. A soft voice from Qing Yanjing reached Mu Chen's ears. Mu Chen's heart shuddered slightly. So, this was the Mo Tian who was rumored to have fought the Flame Emperor? Truly, he carried an extraordinary presence. As Mu Chen studied Mo Tian, the latter seemed to sense his gaze. He raised his eyes slightly, spotting Mu Chen and his group in the distance. When Mo Tian's gaze fell upon him, Mu Chen felt as if the surrounding space had solidified. It was as if he himself had been frozen, like an insect trapped in amber, unable to move a single inch. Cough. An old cough suddenly echoed through the frozen space, the sound wave shattering the stillness. Fu Tuxian shot a cold glance at Mo Tian in the distance. Noticing Fu Tuxian's gaze, Mo Tian smiled faintly, nodding at him and Qing Yinjing in a gesture of greeting. Humph, a clan leader, yet he's showing off his power to the younger generation. Mo Tian's mindset hasn't improved, Fu Tuxian sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Mu Chen broke free from the frozen state, his expression calm, with no visible anger. He reflected on the earlier sensation of being trapped and remarked, "So this is the power of a saint grade? It's truly impressive." Just one glance, and I was completely immobilized. He then turned to Fu Tuxian, smiling. "Thanks for stepping in, Grand Elder, but there's no need to be upset. After all, I'll be taking the eternal undying body, which has been protected like a treasure for so many years, with me soon." Fu Tuxian chuckled in amusement. "You're quite arrogant, aren't you? You really think that eternal undying body belongs to you?" Mu Chen smiled back, but a sharp glint flickered in his dark eyes. "Is that boy Qing Yinjing's son?" As they spoke, Mo Tian withdrew his gaze and smiled faintly at Mahayu beside him. Mahayu nodded, his voice carrying a hint of admiration. "This kid is no ordinary person. To have reached this level at such a young age, he's a monster. If given more time, I might not even be able to defeat him." Mo Tian looked at the ancient stone tower. But sadly, he doesn't have that much time. He's not destined for such a life. Mahayu chuckled and nodded. "Indeed, because this time, I will become the new master of the eternal undying body." His words were filled with strong confidence. After all, compared to the other competitors, his chances of success were indeed the highest. "I hope you won't fail," Mo Tian said, his hand gently rubbing the stone lion on the pillar in front of him. His eyelids lowered, and his voice was calm, without a hint of emotion. "Of course, even if I fail, no one will be able to take the eternal undying body from me. That over there should be the Azure Spear Yi Qing, right?" Mu Chen turned his gaze to the northwest of the stone tower. On a high ground, a man in a green robe stood with his hands behind his back. His face was handsome, but his slightly dark red eyes seemed to contain a murderous aura, making one's heart skip a beat. The air around him was cold and oppressive, and no one dared approach him. "And there's Vidra King Shirluo, Saber Saint Tuobatsang," Mu Chen continued, observing from a distance. Not far from Yi Qing, a thin man wearing a golden kasaya stood. His bald head gleamed, reflecting light, making him extremely noticeable. Beneath what seemed like a mild smile, there was an underlying aura of a savage beast, hiding immense power. On a distant, ruined structure, a man dressed in black stood expressionless. Behind him, a broken blade hung, and from every pore on his body, a terrifying blade aura seemed to emanate at all times. Any creature that ventured within a few feet of him would be shredded into blood mist by the blade's energy. Sure enough, they've all arrived. Feeling the powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy, Mu Chen felt his blood boiling. It was a craving, as though something within these people was irresistibly drawing him in. Mu Chen knew it was the attraction between immortal golden bodies. Boom. At that moment, the earth trembled, and an ancient rumbling sound echoed. Instantly, countless gazes were drawn, and they abruptly looked up, their intense stares fixated on the ancient stone tower atop the mountain peak. The tightly shut stone doors of the tower slowly creaked open under the weight of those gazes, carrying with them the aura of age and time. The sound of the stone doors scraping the ground was deep and resonant, and Mu Chen, whose eyes had been slightly closed, suddenly snapped them open, his gaze sharp and cutting like a blade. The eternal tower had finally opened. Screech. The mottled stone doors slowly parted, revealing a pitch-black interior that radiated an aura of antiquity and mystery. At the foot of the mountain, all eyes were locked on the opening stone doors, their gazes filled with desire and greed. If it weren't well known that only those who had achieved the immortal golden body could step inside, many powerful figures would have long since rushed in without hesitation. After all, the allure of the eternal undying body was too great. On the towering stone platform, Mo Tian also fixed his gaze on the opening doors, his eyes filled with a complex mix of longing and intense possessiveness. Among the 5 ancient clans, the other 4 clans possessed a primordial law body, a legacy passed down from their ancestors who had achieved it long ago. However, none of these clans had anyone who had recently attained the primordial law body. Despite this, the others were the true masters, while they were merely custodians. But the Mo ancient clan had lost the race. Their ancestor had once competed with the Immortal Emperor for the eternal undying body. However, the Immortal Emperor had surpassed him and ultimately succeeded, becoming the strongest in the Great Thousand Worlds. Perhaps because of this, the Immortal Emperor had entrusted the Mo ancient clan with the responsibility of guarding the eternal undying body. For the other 4 clans, who possessed a primordial law body, it was a constant source of jealousy and resentment that the Mo clan was relegated to the role of a mere guardian. Therefore, the Mo ancient clan had a deep obsession with the eternal undying body. Immortal Emperor, the Mo ancient clan has guarded the eternal undying body for tens of thousands of years. Now, it is time you truly entrust it to us, isn't it? After all, you took the eternal undying body from our ancestor back then. It is only right to return it to us now, don't you think? Imohition's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of gloom passing through them before quickly disappearing. He then shifted his gaze to the more than 100 figures closest to the mountain peak. These were the ones qualified to enter the Eternal Tower. The Eternal Tower has opened, but let me remind you all, inside, the competition will be fierce. Half of the participants will be eliminated on each floor. So, if you want to make it to the end, you will need to push others out of your way. Imohition's cold voice echoed, causing many of those present to stiffen, their faces turning serious. Half eliminated on each floor. Chen furrowed his brow. Such a high elimination rate was truly terrifying. This meant that entering the Eternal Tower would only lead to brutal battles and bloody struggles. In some ways, the Eternal Tower seemed like a house of traps, where only those who persevered to the end would finally get to witness the true eternal undying body. Whoosh. As Imohition's words ended, Imohiu's figure shot forward, transforming into a streak of light that dashed through the sky, unhesitatingly diving into the opening stone doors. Swish. Swish. Following him were Yuqing, Shiluo, and Teobatsang, all taking to the air. With their lead, the atmosphere grew lively as streaks of light surged like a torrential rain towards the stone doors. I'm going to, Chen said to Qing Yinjing and Fu Tuxian. Be careful, Qing Yinjing nodded slightly, her expression filled with concern. If it becomes too much, just give up. The primordial law body is powerful, but you can also try the boundless radiance body from our Futu ancient clan. It's also a primordial law body and not weaker than the eternal undying body. Cough. Fu Tuxian, who was nearby, gave a loud cough and said, even if you're the first elder now, you can't just let people access the boundless radiance body casually. It requires permission from the ancestral tower. But Qing Yinjing ignored him and said, I'm the first elder, I can make recommendations. And how do you know the ancestral tower won't approve? You. Seeing the two of them arguing, Chen couldn't help but smile, shaking his head. He didn't say anything more, instead transforming into a streak of light and soaring through the sky, charging straight into the stone gate. In less than a minute, over 100 figures had entered the stone tower. As they did, Mahatian waved his sleeve, and streams of spiritual light gathered in midair, eventually forming over 100 massive spiritual mirrors, each clearly reflecting the figures of those who had entered. As Chen rushed through the stone gate, he immediately felt a strong spatial fluctuation. However, he didn't resist it. He allowed the wave to envelop him, and after a few moments, the darkness in front of him faded, revealing a barren land before his eyes. At this moment, Chen stood on a small hill in a desolate wilderness. The entire world seemed to exude an aura of age and ancientness. Chen stood still, his perception expanding. He soon realized that the space in this world was twisted, as if it had been sliced into numerous small regions. However, with his extraordinary perception, he could still vaguely sense violent waves of spiritual energy rampaging through the entire realm. Has the battle already begun? Chen murmured softly to himself. Buzz. Just as his voice fell, there was a sudden fluctuation in the space not far ahead, followed by a light shadow charging toward him, its sharp gaze locking onto Chen. But when the figure saw Chen's appearance, his expression changed. Without hesitation, he turned around and fled. The man appeared to be middle-aged, his strength at the mid-spirit grade. However, he clearly recognized Chen and knew that although Chen was also only at the mid-spirit grade, his combat power was frighteningly formidable. Since you're here, why run? Just as the man was about to turn, Chen's figure appeared in front of him like a ghost, a faint smile on his face. Those who had entered the Eternal Tower were all competitors. There were no distinctions of good or bad, only different stances. I've heard of Lord Mu's great name. Today I shall experience it for myself. The middle-aged man, seeing he had no way to escape, made a decisive move. He stamped his foot, and golden light gathered, forming a massive supreme Dharma form behind him. The purple-golden glow emitted mysterious fluctuations. That familiar supreme Dharma form was none other than the immortal golden body. Chen looked at the golden giant with a hint of admiration in his heart. After all, this was the first time he had seen someone else summon the immortal golden body. Immortal divine runes! The middle-aged man shouted, and the golden light on the immortal golden body surged. Massive divine runes, resembling gigantic serpents, began to form, a total of 300 of them, exuding immense power. Condense! The 300 immortal divine runes fused together, forming a purple-gold sword of light. The sword's sharp aura pierced the sky, even tearing through the void. With a swish, it sliced through space and struck down toward Chen in a furious slash. The barren land below was split open, leaving long rifts from the force of the sword. Chen looked up, and within his black pupils, a crystal tower appeared. Spiritual energy surged within him, all transforming into mighty crystal spiritual energy. His robe fluttered in the non-existent wind, making a crisp sound. He pressed his hands together, and the crystal spiritual energy surged out like a tidal wave, directly transforming into a torrent of crystal light that tore through the heavens, clashing head-on with the purple-gold sword of light. Clang! A deafening sound echoed as a spiritual energy storm erupted. The crystal flood, upon coming into contact with the purple-gold sword, transformed into millions of crystal strands that wrapped around the sword. The vast spiritual energy on the sword quickly dimmed and was ultimately scattered into countless light particles. Go! Chen flicked his finger, and the millions of crystal strands shot through the space, reappearing outside the immortal golden body. In the blink of an eye, they shot down with immense force. Sealing power? The middle-aged man sensed the mystical power within the crystal strands, and his expression changed. He immediately activated the immortal golden body, causing golden light to surge and form defense barriers as solid as a city wall. However, the crystal strands still wrapped around him, layer upon layer, eventually forming a massive crystal cocoon that enveloped the entire immortal golden body. Chen gazed at the enormous crystal cocoon in the sky, his eyes filled with spiritual light. He was now closer than ever to reaching the late spirit grade, and his crystal spiritual energy was strong enough to match even a mid-immortal grade opponent head-on. Dealing with a mid-spirit grade opponent was clearly not difficult, even if this opponent had cultivated the immortal golden body. The light cocoon stood tall between heaven and earth. After what seemed like a long wait, Chen flicked his sleeve, and the light cocoon immediately shattered, transforming into countless sparkling crystal particles scattered across the sky. As the light cocoon dispersed, a surge of purple-gold light emerged from within, and the massive immortal golden body stood firm. The middle-aged man was perched on the shoulder of the immortal golden body, though his face wore an expression of bitterness. Crack! Suddenly, cracks appeared on the surface of the immortal golden body, rapidly spreading. In the end, with a thunderous boom, it shattered into pieces. At the same time, crystal light strands appeared on the middle-aged man's body, his spiritual energy dimming, clearly sealed for the time being. Mu Mansion Lord's reputation is well-deserved. I concede defeat, the middle-aged man said bitterly. Just as his voice fell, a beam of light descended from the heavens, illuminating the middle-aged man. Spatial fluctuations appeared, signaling that he was about to be teleported out of the Eternal Tower. Thank you for the challenge, Chen nodded slightly and said calmly. The light flickered, and the middle-aged man's figure vanished. However, at the moment he was expelled from the Eternal Tower, a purple-gold beam shot out from the center of his forehead, heading straight for Chen. Chen extended his hand and caught the purple-gold light. The beam radiated an aura of immortality and mystery. This is the immortal aura of the immortal golden body. Chen's gaze flickered. He was very familiar with this kind of aura. It was essentially the essence of the immortal golden body. The more intense the immortal aura, the more powerful the immortal golden body would be. Those who fail will have their immortal aura drawn out by the Eternal Tower. Chen's expression became complicated. This immortal aura was almost the core of the immortal golden body. Once drawn out, the power of the immortal golden body would undoubtedly weaken. This, then, was the cost of failure. In some ways, the Eternal Tower was indeed quite cruel. However, Mu Chen was no weak-hearted person. The path of a supreme expert was full of competition. If one did not possess an indomitable will to move forward, perhaps one day, his fate would be no different. Mu Chen slowly closed his hand, and a faint purple-gold shadow emerged behind him. With a single breath, he absorbed the immortal aura, and the shadow grew even deeper, its mysterious aura becoming even more powerful. Mu Chen opened his eyes, and the purple-gold shadow dissipated. Feeling the subtle changes in his immortal golden body, he restrained his interest, then resolutely stepped into the distorted space. Even if this thorny path only allowed one to pass, Mu Chen would still fight for it. Boom! The brilliant immortal golden body exploded on the barren land, scattering into countless golden particles. A figure was sent flying in a disheveled manner, leaving deep marks on the ground. Blood spurted out, and his aura was weak, lying in a deep pit, gravely wounded. When the figure completely lost its combat ability, the Eternal Tower responded. The figure's surroundings warped, and he was expelled from the tower. As the figure was sent out of the Eternal Tower, a purple gold beam shot from his forehead. In the distance, a figure slowly descended from the air. With a wave of his hand, the purple gold beam spiraled around his palm. Behind him, a massive purple gold shadow appeared, devouring the immortal aura. As the immortal aura entered his body, the light on the purple gold shadow's body grew even deeper and more condensed. A rich immortal aura spread, and the shadow's power surged. The fourth immortal aura. This figure was, of course, Mu Chen. He gazed at the ever-deepening and more condensed immortal golden body behind him, his eyes flashing with admiration. From the beginning until now, he had defeated 4 competitors and obtained 4 immortal origins from them. These 4 immortal origins had been absorbed by his immortal golden body. Now, his immortal golden body was 20% stronger than it was at the start. But do not underestimate this 20%, for Mu Chen's immortal golden body was already near completion. Any improvement now would be extremely difficult, yet in this short time, he had increased his strength by 20%. And this was just the beginning. If he could seize all the immortal origins from the other competitors in the Eternal Tower, his immortal golden body's power would surge to a terrifying level. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, Mu Chen's eyes flickered with a fiery intensity. Buzz! At the same time as his thought shifted, he suddenly felt the violent fluctuation of space in the world around him. The surrounding scene began to blur and distort. Seeing this change, Mu Chen was not surprised. His eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered to himself, "Half of them have been eliminated already? That was fast." Clearly, the cause of this change was the fact that half of the 108 practitioners of the immortal golden body in the Eternal Tower had already been eliminated. The elimination process would continue layer by layer, until finally, they would reach the level where the eternal undying body was located. The surrounding space kept warping, and gradually, it became clearer. The barren land transformed into towering mountains, peaks rising one after another. Mu Chen stood atop a green peak, and as the surrounding space stabilized, his gaze immediately shifted forward. He saw 2 figures emerge on 2 mountain peaks not far away. One of them was at the late spirit grade, not attracting much attention, so Mu Chen's gaze was more focused on the other. This was a man in blue robes, his features sharp, his eyes full of rebelliousness. One could tell at a glance that he was not someone easy to deal with. Moreover, the vast spiritual energy fluctuations emanating from him revealed that he had reached the mid-immortal grade. As Mu Chen observed the man in blue robes, the latter also locked onto him. When he clearly saw Mu Chen's face, he froze for a moment, then a strange smile appeared on his face, as he said, "I didn't expect to run into the famous mansion Lord Mu here." "And you are?" Mu Chen's expression remained unfazed as he spoke. "I am Qin Donghai, just a small figure, nothing worth mentioning. I'm ranked 6th on the win rate list, just behind you," the man in blue said, his gaze audacious as he examined Mu Chen, with a hint of scrutiny. "Oh." Mu Chen nodded slightly, his expression calm. Not far away, the man at the late spirit grade saw the tension brewing between the two and quietly retreated, then fled into the distance. Mu Chen glanced at him but did not give chase, as he could sense that Qin Donghai had locked onto him. "You want to fight me?" Mu Chen said slowly. "I just want to test how much ability you have to be ranked ahead of me." Qin Donghai responded nonchalantly, then smiled. "What? Mansion Lord Mu? Are you afraid?" Mu Chen gave a wry smile and said, "I'm more afraid you'll run away. It's not every day you come across a big fish." In his senses, the immortal origin emanating from Qin Donghai was much richer than that of ordinary people. Clearly, he had defeated several competitors before and seized their immortal origins. So even if Qin Donghai didn't attack him, Mu Chen wouldn't let him go. After all, defeating him would give Mu Chen an immortal origin that could rival several others. As Mu Chen faced off against Qin Donghai, countless strong individuals outside the Eternal Tower also noticed the situation here. Their gazes immediately locked onto a spiritual energy mirror. It's Qin Donghai and Mu Chen. Qin Donghai has been a renowned expert for years, with an impressive record, not much weaker than Mu Chen. Yes, he himself is at the mid-immortal grade, and with the immortal golden body as his formidable strength, many of his peers have fallen before him. I wonder who will come out on top when these two clash. Around the Eternal Tower, whispers spread. In these dozens of spiritual energy mirrors, two extraordinarily strong individuals had finally crossed paths. This confrontation would undoubtedly be much more exciting than those happening elsewhere. This kid finally encountered a tough opponent. Qin Donghai is no small fry, Fu Tuxian remarked as he watched the figures in the spiritual energy mirror, his eyes squinting. Qing Yinjing gave a faint smile and said, "He's just Qin Donghai. He's not worthy of being considered a formidable enemy by Xun'er." Fu Tuxian puffed his beard and scoffed, "You really do elevate this kid too much." "That's because my son deserves it," Qing Yinjing responded nonchalantly, a slight curve of her red lips. "Well, I'll see for myself." "There's no protective clan array here for him," Fu Tuxian grumbled, clearly still harboring resentment over the time Mu Chen used the clan's protective array to defeat the elders of the Futu ancient clan. Boom. The powerful spiritual energy formed a storm, surrounding Qin Donghai's entire body. The spiritual energy compressed the space, causing it to twist, while the mountain beneath his feet cracked and shattered continuously. The full eruption of a mid-immortal grade cultivator's power was clearly earth-shattering. Mu Chen looked at the astonishing aura of Qin Donghai, raising an eyebrow. The momentum displayed by Qin Donghai was evidently much stronger than that of the Ghost Emperor, who was also at the mid-immortal grade. Though I may not be able to deal with the four below them, no one can stop me. Qin Donghai's voice thundered like a storm, reverberating through the air with arrogance. Mu Chen smiled slightly upon hearing this and said, "Well, we're different. Even those four. Today, they won't stop me." Qin Donghai's eyes narrowed, a cold smile crossing his face. Mu Chen's words clearly suggested that he had lost his sharpness, unwilling to compete with the four. "I'll see what qualifications you have to say that." Qin Donghai's gaze sharpened, and his hands quickly formed a seal. His sleeves fluttered as a vast ocean of spiritual energy surged forward. The ocean, formed by spiritual power, crashed forward with such force that even the space itself seemed to collapse. See dragon art. The sky suddenly cracked open as if a river of stars was falling. It transformed into 8 gigantic water dragons, their roars shaking the heavens, their power immense. Water Annihilation Pearl. Qin Donghai's hands gathered the ocean, compressing it with incredible force until it formed a deep blue spiritual pearl. Within the pearl, turbulent waves surged as though it contained an endless, boundless ocean. In less than a dozen breaths, Qin Donghai had unleashed 2 of his most powerful divine abilities, each with terrifying power. Such attacks could easily sweep aside any mid-immortal grade opponent. Go. The sea dragons roared as the deep blue spiritual pearl shattered the void, shooting straight toward Mu Chen's forehead. Mu Chen remained unmoving. Suddenly, a chaotic light burst from behind his head, shooting upward and sweeping forward with tremendous force. The chaotic light swept through, and both the sea dragons and the deep blue spiritual pearl vanished into thin air. The previously overwhelming momentum disappeared in an instant. Qin Donghai's face turned ashen as he watched. Despite unleashing his most powerful attacks, Mu Chen stood there, untouched, effortlessly nullifying every move. The gap between them was glaringly obvious. "I don't believe you're really that powerful." Qin Donghai, unwilling to accept defeat, shouted fiercely. Behind him, purple golden light surged as a massive immortal golden body materialized, the purple gold glow shaking the very void. Faced with Mu Chen's overwhelming strength, he had no choice but to summon his immortal golden body. "Finally, you're using the immortal golden body?" Mu Chen smiled as he saw this, then stretched out his finger and pointed in the air. Buzz. As Mu Chen's finger fell, Qin Donghai sensed something was wrong. He looked up in shock and saw a heavy crystal tower descending from the sky. It pierced through the void, casting a shadow over him and his immortal golden body. Snap! Mu Chen's crisp snap echoed through the air, followed by his calm voice. Eightfold Pagoda. Boom. Boom. The crystal tower trembled violently, sending out such powerful spiritual energy fluctuations that they shattered the nearby space. The shaking lasted for some time before gradually subsiding. Mu Chen's expression remained calm as he waved his sleeve. The crystal floating pagoda turned into a beam of light and entered the crown of his head. Meanwhile, the space in front of him collapsed in layers. Qin Dahai had long since vanished, leaving only a thick purple-gold beam of light spiraling toward him. Mu Chen extended his palm, grabbing the thick immortal origin and feeling its vastness. A satisfied smile appeared on his face as he didn't even glance at where Qin Dahai had disappeared. He simply turned and walked toward the distance, stepping through the air. As Mu Chen swiftly and decisively dealt with Qin Dahai, outside the Eternal Tower, countless powerful individuals stood in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the scene. The entire world seemed to fall into a deep silence. No one had anticipated that what was supposed to be an intense battle would end so abruptly and with such speed.